society uses to group people are what determines one's race. In the U.S., the most important physical characteristic is skin color, as evidenced by the names we have given to our races, black and white. Other societies have different characteristics that they view as important for classification, as well as different terms for racial categories. Ethnicity is based on common ancestry and culture. Most terms used to describe ethnic categories include the name of the country of origin, Mexican, Japanese, Irish, etc. Race and ethnicity in the United States Census, as defined by the Federal Office of Management and Budget, are self-identification data items in which residents choose the race or races with which they most closely identify, and also indicate whether or not they are of Hispanic or Latino origin, which is an ethnicity. There are three ways for minority groups to originate. The first is through political expansion. One example of this is the way that Mexicans have become a minority group in California and in the United States when we expanded the United States borders to include California, which used to be a part of Mexico. There's also voluntary migration, which is probably what most of us think of when we think of minority groups, people coming into the country of their own free will. And then there's also involuntary migration, like in the case of slavery. Characteristics of minority groups include that their minority status is based on some sort of ascribed characteristic, so something that they were born with that they have no control over. So skin color, eye color, hair texture, any of those characteristics that they are unable to change. Members of minority groups also experience prejudice from the dominant group and from other groups, and collective discrimination against them. Within minority groups, the trend is toward endogamy, or marrying within the minority group, and they have a sense of solidarity or affinity with other members of their group. Minority groups usually have one of these four objectives. The first, pluralism, means that the group maintains its uniqueness but shares equal standing in society. Assimilation is when the group adopts the dominant culture and tries to blend in with the larger society. Secession means that the group breaks off from the large society to form a society of their own, and militancy is when the group engages in combat with the dominant group. Policies established to deal with minority groups ranges from the pluralist model, which is very accepting of all races and cultures, to the most violent and unaccepting model, genocide, which aims to kill off the minority group. The terms used to describe minority groups and the attitudes we have toward them are passed down to the younger generation as a part of the socialization process. These terms and beliefs form our prejudices and lead to labels being applied to certain people. Jews are cheap, Mexicans are lazy, blacks are criminals. When these things are repeated enough, those in the minority groups can internalize these labels and begin to accept them as true or inescapable. This in turn can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The black child who grows up being treated like a criminal or a lost cause may end up becoming a criminal because that is society's expectation of him and his expectation of himself. By asserting dominance over minority groups, elites ensure that there will always be an underclass willing to do the dirty work of society for low pay. Can you imagine how much fruits and veggies would cost if it wasn't for the cheap labor of migrant farm workers? How many people would be able to afford nannies and housekeepers if there weren't minorities willing to do this work at bargain rates? Because race ethnicity is so intertwined with class, the conflict perspective on race is very similar to their perspective on poverty. When it comes to race, conflict theorists point out that the dominant group often tries to play up racial ethnic differences between minorities. This keeps minority groups from uniting and joining forces to rise up against the dominant group. Animosity between blacks, Latinos, and Asians help whites maintain their power. Here in the U.S., a variety of strategies have been used to deal with minority groups. You probably remember learning about the forced assimilation of Native American children in your high school U.S. history class. Today, policies focus more on pluralism rather than assimilation, and encourage minorities to maintain their cultural traditions and take pride in their racial ethnic heritage and their American nationality.